My stepfather kept joking at every funeral that I'd inherit nothing because I wasn't real family. He went pale when I revealed his family secret. The first time Rick said it, I was 14 and standing beside my great-uncle's casket. Rick leaned over and whispered loud enough for my cousins to hear that blood was thicker than water, and stepchildren shouldn't expect handouts from families they'd married into. My mother squeezed my shoulder and told me later that Rick was just being protective of our financial security, making sure I understood the realities of inheritance law. But it became his signature joke at every funeral. When Grandma Dorothy died, Rick announced during the reception that her will probably wouldn't mention me since I wasn't technically her granddaughter. At my step-grandfather's service, he made comments about how estate lawyers always prioritized biological connections over emotional ones. Each time, he'd follow up with a pat on my back and a reminder that I was lucky to have any family stability at all. The pattern continued for 8 years, through 11 different funerals. Rick seemed to relish these morbid occasions as opportunities to reinforce my outsider status within the family. He'd give speeches about bloodlines and heritage while I stood there feeling like an imposter wearing borrowed grief. My mother always defended him afterward, explaining that he'd grown up poor and understood the importance of protecting family assets. What struck me as odd was how Rick never shared his own family stories during these speeches about heritage and bloodlines. He had no childhood anecdotes, no tales of eccentric relatives, no family traditions he'd brought to our household. When pressed about his background, he'd deflect by saying the present family was all that mattered, and dwelling on the past was counterproductive to building a strong future together. The family found his mysterious past romantic and intriguing. My mother thought his reluctance to discuss his childhood showed depth and sensitivity about whatever trauma he'd experienced growing up. My aunts respected his focus on moving forward rather than wallowing in old wounds. Rick had successfully created an aura of dignified privacy while positioning himself as the authority on legitimate family connections. His frequent business trips added another layer of mystery that everyone accepted without question. Rick traveled constantly for work, disappearing for weeks at a time with vague explanations about client meetings and project deadlines. He worked in business consulting, he claimed, helping companies restructure their operations. The travel allowed him to command high fees and explained why he could afford to support our family so comfortably. My mother defended his absences as evidence of his dedication to providing for us financially. When relatives questioned why he missed so many family events, Rick would redirect by making jokes about modern families and how stepchildren should be grateful for any stability they received from non-biological parents. His pattern of absence became normalized as the price of financial security. The expensive gifts Rick brought from his business trips were always perfectly chosen to demonstrate both his financial success and his thoughtfulness. Designer clothes for my mother, electronics for me, luxury items that suggested he'd spent considerable time and money selecting them. He'd present these gifts with elaborate stories about finding them in exclusive boutiques or having them specially ordered from distant cities. I began to notice patterns in Rick's travel schedule that didn't quite make sense for legitimate business consulting. He'd disappear for exactly 2 weeks at a time, then return for precisely 10 days before leaving again. His destinations seemed to rotate through a limited number of cities, primarily Denver, Phoenix, and Portland. When I asked about the repetitive nature of his routes, Rick explained that he maintained long-term contracts with major clients in those markets. The first crack in Rick's facade appeared when I was 22, and helping my mother organize tax documents for their accountant. While sorting through social security statements and employment records, I noticed inconsistencies in Rick's documentation. His social security number seemed to have been issued much later than it should have been for someone his age, and his employment history only went back to 1998. Curious about these discrepancies, I began researching public records online during my lunch breaks at work. What I discovered made my hands shake as I scrolled through database after database. Richard Montgomery didn't exist in any official capacity before 1998. No birth certificate, no school records, no employment history, no military service. It was as if he'd materialized from nothing 25 years ago. Digging deeper through archived newspaper articles and court records, I found references to a Robert Phillips who'd been wanted for embezzling $180,000 from a construction company in Nevada before disappearing without a trace in early 1998. The physical description matched Rick perfectly, down to the distinctive scar on his left hand from what he'd always claimed was a childhood accident with a broken window. The photograph in the old newspaper article took my breath away. It was unmistakably Rick, though 25 years younger and wearing a different expression. Full story on my channel and linked below.